Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called Find the Runaway Princess. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! The dagger cuts through the air with deadly precision, but it misses its target by mere inches, sailing past Elysia and Rakan. Elysia's heart races, her instincts taking over as she steps back, her breath shallow, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She can't take the sharp sting of fear, though the immediate danger has passed. Rakan, his hands stained with blood, trembles and shakes uncontrollably. The weight of his sorrow is visible in his expression. There's a deep, painful longing in his gaze, a look that speaks of regret. Elysia feels guilty, knowing that she's been hiding for so long, but she can see that his regret runs far deeper. The story unfolds 2 years prior, when Elysia was still preparing to step into a world far beyond the safety of her mansion. Before her enrollment at the Swordsmanship Royal Academy, her nanny gently reminds her to stay vigilant. Elysia understands the warning all too well. She always knows that the relationship between the Ortega Kingdom and the Kashutra Empire was fraught with tension and hostility. Now, as the Princess of Ortega, Elysia was about to embark on a journey that would take her to a neutral ground, the Swordsmanship Royal Academy, a place that was meant to serve as a sanctuary away from the bitter rivalries of the outside world. The morning she leaves her mansion, her nanny checks to ensure Elysia has everything she needs, from her clothes to her personal belongings. Yet there was hesitation in her nanny's eyes, a lingering unease. Her nanny urges her to avoid the Imperial Prince, a warning she never expects, although she thought that their paths would never cross. Too early to think of that, Elysia. How can you be so sure about that? However, the weight of her nanny's words stays with her as she makes her way toward her new life. After a warm embrace, Elysia reassures her nanny that she would be fine. Before she leaves, her nanny reminds her of her admission certificate, which she almost forgot. With a final farewell, Elysia gets into the carriage and leaves the mansion. Upon arriving at Swordsmanship Royal Academy, Elysia was greeted by a mountain of dresses her nanny had packed for her. Her roommate hadn't arrived yet, giving her a brief moment to organize the piles of clothes. Just as she starts to settle into the room, there's a knock on the door. A girl standing in the doorway informs Elysia that the principal was requesting her presence. Intrigued, Elysia follows the girl through the hallways, her mind buzzing with questions. As they walk, Elysia inquires about the purpose of the meeting, and the girl explains that the academy has a system where senior students assist newcomers. That during their initial months, they will help them adjust to the academy's environment and culture. I wonder who could be the senior that will be assigned to her. When they arrive at the principal's office, Elysia enters the room, where the principal greets her warmly. He asks if she's aware of the reason for the summons, and Elysia replies that she assumes that it was to assign a senior student to her. The principal nods and proceeds, asking her if she was the type of student who cares about her status in life. Elysia says that, as a place of learning, everyone at the academy would be treated equally, regardless of their title or background. They go on to discuss the direct senior and junior system, with Elysia expecting a formal letter from the academy to announce her senior. But to her surprise, the principal doesn't follow the usual procedure and just assigns someone to her right then and there. Just as the conversation was about to continue, there was a knock at the door. The door opens, and a fine-looking man enters. The principal turns towards Elysia with a slight smile and says that he's her direct senior. Elysia froze. The shock hit her immediately as she looked into the face of the man before her. Rakan. She didn't expect their paths to cross in this way, especially not within the walls of this academy. Rakan, for his part, seems equally surprised. His expression shifts ever so slightly as he meets her gaze. He's drop-dead gorgeous! Elysia, don't even try to avoid him. Elysia greets her assigned senior with formality, introducing herself, but he only gives her a cold, almost uninterested glance. She also didn't expect him to have a good-looking, striking appearance to catch her off guard. The principal continues to explain the senior-junior relationship, probing if they believe they'll be able to get along. Despite the awkwardness hanging in the air, Elysia answers with a positive tone, knowing there's little else she can do to avoid the situation now. After a brief pause, the principal suggests they take their time and leave for an important meeting. But as soon as the principal leaves, Rakan doesn't hold back, immediately accusing Elysia of manipulating the situation just to get close to him. The accusation left her stunned, struggling to process what he said. She gathers her composure enough to ask him, her voice trembling slightly, if he's from the Empire. "I didn't expect this level of arrogance. You're really something else, mister." He replies that she's the Princess of Ortega and adds that he knows she doesn't want him because of his origin. However, he accuses her of scheming him, declaring that she's not his type. Elysia then asks how he can have that kind of confidence. He replies smugly that it's natural for someone as wealthy and attractive as him. He adds that she shouldn't expect anything more, as their relationship is merely just a connection of that of a senior and a junior. Before Rakan can open the door to leave, Elysia shouts after him, saying that if he's not interested in pigeons and teacups, she's not interested either. Without waiting for his reaction, she storms off to her room. She hadn't expected to encounter someone from the Empire so soon, and her frustration boils over. When she arrives in front of her room, she's shocked to find the door already open. A wave of anxiety hits her as she remembers the mess she left behind. Stepping into the room, she's greeted by a girl who asks if she's the roommate and apologizes for touching her things without permission. Elysia quickly assures her it's fine, joking that she has saved her and asks for her name. "The pile of clothes is way too much. Good thing your roommate's there to save the day." The girl introduces herself as Sophie Whitaker, a second-year student from a merchant family. Elysia introduces herself in return, but Sophie immediately recognizes her as the Princess of Ortega. However, Elysia humbly brushes it off, saying that here they're all just students. Elysia shares that she just came from meeting Rakan, her direct senior. Upon hearing this, Sophie advises her to be cautious, adding that the principal likely has his reasons for pairing them. After a while, the students gather in the hall. Elysia ends up sitting next to Rakan. As she observes him, she can't help but think how good-looking he is, but his personality leaves much to be desired. Still, she concludes that he might have his own struggles hidden beneath his cold demeanor. Meanwhile, Rakan finds himself looking at Elysia as she dozes off during class. She immediately notices his gaze and straightens up, feeling slightly self-conscious. When the lecture ends, the professor announces that their next class will be Swordsmanship and instructs the students to move to the training ground. As Elysia leaves the hall, she's shocked to hear Rakan casually comment that he finds her handwriting impressive. While searching for the training ground, a girl approaches her and asks her name. The girl introduces herself as Elizabeth Marche from the Shati Kingdom, renowned for its mines. Elysia greets her warmly and asks what she's up to. With a cunning tone, Elizabeth replies that she expected Elysia to be beautiful, but finds her appearance plain. Who does this girl think she is, judging Elysia like that? The audacity! As Elysia hears Elizabeth's words, she immediately thinks it's a deliberate attempt to provoke her and start a fight. However, before she can react, her nanny's words echo in her mind, reminding her to behave and avoid confrontation. Elysia stays composed and calmly agrees with Elizabeth's remark, adding that she's not used to dressing up for herself. She then casually mentions that she envies Elizabeth for having the time to focus on her appearance. However, at the back of Elysia's mind is that Elizabeth is trying to mock her dressing as a commoner and insulting her kingdom. She just says to herself that she will just keep on complimenting her. After that, Elysia leaves to head to her next class. On her way to the training ground, she reflects that Elizabeth's lack of response likely signifies agreement with what she said. Resolving to stay composed, she silently promises herself to remain kind and gentle in her responses moving forward. Don't lower yourself to her level. She's not worth your energy. As she has her class, Elysia composes herself in winning that sparring game and wins. On the other hand, Rakan says to her sparring partner that he lost because he wants to finish the game. Hearing what Rakan says, she thinks that he gives advice to her sparring partner instead of cheering his direct junior. That's some next-level finesse right there. If Rakan doesn't notice it now, he's seriously missing out. However, Rakan unexpectedly compliments her swordsmanship and asks for her guidance, leaving Elysia stunned. She finds it hard to believe that, after feeling like an unwanted burden, he would suddenly seek her help. She also realizes that she tends to become more competitive whenever he's around, suspecting it might be because he's from an enemy country. Afterwards, it is their turn to spar with swords, and Rakan, with a playful grin, pleads for Elysia to go easy on him. She responds with a small, knowing smile, but doesn't utter a word. As their battle begins, Elysia's focus sharpens and her determination becomes evident. She silently vows to end the match with a single decisive strike. Her mind races as she forms a quick yet effective strategy. First, she plans to feint an attack on his lower body to draw his guard downward. Then she aims to shift her strike upwards, targeting his upper body to disrupt his defense. As their spar continues, Elysia thinks that Rakan is going easy on her. However, after a while, her sword strike was easily dodged away by her opponent, which made her lose the game. She isn't happy about that, and confronts him that if he's going to spar with her and hold back, he should just instead let her win in the first place. Rakan seems confused about what she says. Elysia continues to voice out her frustrations and says that she gave her full capacity during the spar, but he's just fooling around. Elysia's not having his attitude. Does he even realize how serious she is? As a royal, Elysia thinks that consideration is a sign of neglect. She also thinks that as an Ortega, no one could truly spar with her and doesn't intend to suffer from humiliation. Rakan remains silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable as he deliberates. When he finally speaks, his tone is calm as he explains that his actions are guided by a sense of duty and responsibility. His words feel carefully measured, as if he's trying to justify his choices without revealing too much. Elysia, however, refuses to accept his reason. She says that she doesn't want consideration, nor does she want excuses. Elysia wants Rakan to give his best the next time they spar, and declares confidently that she will win fair and square. To her surprise, Rakan acknowledges her keen perception, commenting that she has a sharp eye. She agrees, noting it's a compliment she hears often. Of course, she's a princess, and there's no doubt about her skill. With that, Rakan finally apologizes for his behavior during their sparring. He explains that his intention wasn't to mock her, but to observe and understand her skills. Curious, Elysia asks why he was holding back. Rakan admits that it has become a habit since he enrolled at the academy, where he learned to temper his strength. He adds that he doesn't want anyone to bleed because of him, emphasizing his reluctance to cause harm. After the sparring session, Elysia returns to her room to rest. Not long after, Sophie arrives, apologizing for interrupting her. Elysia reassures her that it's fine and insists she doesn't want Sophie, her roommate, to feel alone on their first day of school. As they settle into their respective beds, their conversation drifts to the prince. Sophie describes him as someone whose personality can be summed up in one word: popular. Elysia, puzzled, wonders how a prince could possibly be so widely admired. But as she thinks more deeply, she realizes that Rakan's popularity is undeniable. Being associated with him, even in passing, could elevate someone's status, painting their life in a rosy hue. Sophie adds that Rakan is destined to become the crown prince. Elysia reflects on this, musing that by the time he ascends to the position, he will likely face a political marriage. She concludes that their interactions will remain fleeting and insignificant. However, Sophie responds that there's always a chance since he doesn't even want to get closer with female friends. After their conversation, Elysia's mind drifts to her fiancé, Damien. She remembers how deeply she had trusted him and how they were always together. His words still echo in her mind, how he often told her he liked everything about her. Before Elysia enrolled at the academy, she decided to walk through their garden to clear her mind and gather some fresh air. However, to her shock, she unexpectedly saw Damien with another girl on top of him. How could Damien do this to Elysia? The nerve! And who's this girl he's with? The sight was a blow to her, and as she observed the scene, she could feel her heart shatter. From that moment, Elysia couldn't help but question when the betrayal had begun and how Damien could have deceived her like that. For a long time, the hurt lingered in her mind, and she struggled to understand how everything they had built could collapse so suddenly. Despite the pain, she kept her distance from him, closing herself off emotionally. She continued to be in his presence, but the trust she once had was gone. It wasn't until she enrolled at the academy that she finally found the courage to step away from him and the life they had once shared. As she comes back to her senses, Elysia sees Sophie already asleep. She softly mutters goodnight before settling into her own bed. The morning arrives, and Sophie apologizes for falling asleep without finishing their conversation the previous night. Elysia reassures her, saying it's all right since it was already late. Despite this, Sophie still feels bad. To ease her, Elysia mentions that she too went straight to sleep right after Sophie did. As they continue talking, a splash of water suddenly lands on Elysia, causing her to flinch at the coldness. Elizabeth stands nearby, apologizing and explaining that she's not used to carrying things by herself. However, in Elysia's mind, her anger flares and she feels a strong urge to retaliate, ready to grab Elizabeth and kick her. This girl is really pushing it with that attitude. She's got some nerve acting like she owns the place. Sophie, concerned, asks if Elysia is alright and offers her a towel. She's taken aback by Elizabeth's sharp behavior, especially towards someone of Elysia's status. Elysia doesn't understand why Elizabeth acted that way, recalling how she had seemed to provoke her the other day. Elysia, agreeing with Sophie's thoughts, remains puzzled by Elizabeth's behavior and what her intentions truly are. She asks Sophie if she looks unsophisticated, to which Sophie quickly replies that Elysia looks neat. Sophie then asks if Elysia's next class is in the music room, and Elysia confirms it. Don't let it get to you, Elysia. Elizabeth's just acting out because maybe she's insecure. As she sips her coffee, Elysia's thoughts drift to her nanny, the one who had raised her with so much care. She feels guilty, realizing that despite her nanny's efforts to teach her about grace and appearance, she couldn't care much about dressing up. Elysia feels conflicted, thinking that her purpose at the academy is to learn, not to focus on outward appearances. Afterwards, their music lesson starts, and she sees Rakan playing an instrument, which she thinks he's enjoying his spotlight alone. Elysia focuses intently as she holds her violin, playing the piece with graceful precision. This sound fills the room, and she loses herself in the music. After a while, their music teacher suggests that they take a break, but Elysia continues practicing the piece, determined to perfect it. To her surprise, Rakan suddenly appears in front of her, questioning her diligence. Elysia calmly replies that by doing her best, she will have no regrets. Rakan then comments that he hasn't met many royals and doesn't know what their average performance is like. He adds that her dedication reminds him of his younger sibling. Elysia, assuming the sibling is a girl, teasingly mentions that his sibling must be as pretty as she is. Rakan, however, corrects her, explaining that his younger sibling is actually a boy. Rakan shares that his brother is just like her, who works hard to the point he fools himself for the love of their country. Upon hearing this, she cannot believe it and feels strange about the situation they're in. Their interaction first leaves both Elysia and Rakan with a sense of awkwardness at their first meeting. However, despite the awkwardness, Elysia can't shake the strange feeling that their conversation wasn't entirely unpleasant. There was something about it that left her thinking, a curiosity that she hadn't expected to feel. It's a feeling she can't quite place, but it lingers as she continues on with her day. Sophie asks directly to Elysia if she could become her partner for the party willingly. There will be an academy anniversary party soon where if she needs a partner, Sophie will be available. Elysia asks her why she didn't ask her lover, Frederick, instead. Sophie considers herself a commoner. She need not to publicize her relationship with him. It is said that everybody in the academy must be equal, but in the face of power, the rules are useless. The power that nobles hold on the academy still lingers. Sophie then opens another topic, talking about how an academy will hold a selection for male and female representatives. The Academy Anniversary Party will be the official annual event of Swaina Academy, and the highlight of the said event when the students become electors and select their own representatives. The objective of the selection is to inform the students from various countries about Swaina's democratic culture, but this event is only just a popularity contest to the nobles, which make up the majority of the academy. To become a candidate, one should be anonymously recommended, and the result is determined through connections of these nobles. So, basically, the selection of representatives is already decided from the start. What a drag. Elysia asks who this predetermined candidate is she's talking about. It was Beth, the soon-to-be representative, and the one Elysia accidentally met previously. Beth is known for being of royal descent with connections to the Empire and well-known networks. For this, Elysia is in disbelief of how she would witness such an ill-tempered princess enjoying herself on the stage. Elysia suddenly thinks of Rakan being the Lily, the male representative of the academy, but Sophie denies her idea. Rakan is apparently not interested in that kind of spotlight. The soon-to-be male representative is her fiancé, Frederick Watts. Thinking of it, in a neutral country, focusing to only certain nobilities is quite a bias. Disappointing. Elysia holds Sophie's hands as she agrees to be her partner at the party. Nearby, Beth eavesdrops on their conversation and gives a smirk as she was taking notes for it. In their classroom, Elysia and Rakan sit next to each other and wonder how Rakan changed his mind for that. Thanks to him, Elysia is being watched by envious ladies at the back. Elysia looks at Rakan as she sees how he was concentrating on doodling. She was in disbelief. She did not notice the class had already ended because she was busy grasping her situation, having Rakan next to her. To confuse her more, Rakan invites Elysia to come with him as he wants to fulfill his duty as a senior and guide her. In the swordsmanship class break, Rakan suggests that if he could help her in her swordsmanship, Elysia's opponents usually have larger build than her, so her judgment to finish the strikes are good. However, she's too impatient, putting too much strength in her wrists. Rakan thinks that she might be gritting her teeth and enduring the fatigue, which is true. Rakan suggests that she should try relaxing her wrists, because giving strength isn't always the answer. She must remember the moment she needs it. Elysia tried his suggestion, and it worked. She feels much more comfortable. At that moment, Rakan complimented her and then left. It was the first time Elysia saw his genuine smile despite their first impressions. Back in her room, Sophie asks her if her training was tough enough that made her face look very red. Elysia quickly offers an excuse, attributing her flushed face to the sunlight. She then hastily changed the topic, bringing up the cookie Sophie made, effectively steering the conversation away from the previous subject. Sophie doesn't want to press further and instead makes a request. She asks Elysia to deliver something for her. In her hands is a box of cookies tied with a red ribbon, which Sophie entrusts to Elysia, asking her to deliver it to the prince. Though slightly bewildered by the request, Elysia agrees. On her way, she wonders how she's supposed to find the prince, someone she hasn't even met before. Why would her senior Sophie ask her of all people to deliver the cookies? Still, she considers it an opportunity to build rapport and promote peace among the heirs of different nations, so she steels herself to complete the task. As she walks, Elysia notices a man with blonde hair, resembling the figure in the painting of the prince she had once seen hanging on the academy walls. She gathers her courage and is about to approach him when someone calls out to her. Turning, she finds Rakan standing nearby. He casually asks if the swordsmanship class earlier was their final class for the day. Before she can respond, his attention shifts to the red box in her hands. Intrigued, Rakan leans in and takes a deep breath, catching the scent of the cookies inside. Without hesitation, he asks if the box contains cookies. Elysia, startled by how casually he speaks to her, takes a moment to regain her composure. But as she does, she remembers her original mission. Quickly glancing around, she notices the man with blonde hair has disappeared into the alleys. Frustrated, she silently scolds herself for getting distracted. Rakan, meanwhile, seems to take an interest in her task. He asks her who she's delivering the box to, but Elysia ignores the question. This only fuels Rakan's curiosity. He guesses that the cookies are for a man and smugly concludes that Elysia must be delivering them to her boyfriend. Embarrassed and annoyed, Elysia immediately denies the claim, though her reaction only raises his suspicions. Finally, she explains that the cookies are meant for the Prince of the Empire. Rakan raises an eyebrow, following up with another question. Did she make the cookies herself? Before Elysia can answer, Rakan casually takes the box from her hands, much to her disbelief. As he begins to open it, Elysia slaps his hand away, reprimanding him sternly. She lectures him about proper etiquette, emphasizing that one should never open a gift that isn't theirs, especially without permission. Seemingly unfazed by her scolding, Rakan ties the ribbon back onto the box and comments at how different her culture is from his own. To make up for his behavior, Rakan offers to walk her back to the dormitory. Though reluctant at first, Elysia eventually agrees. As they walk, Rakan brings up the topic of the prince, asking what kind of person she thinks he is. Elysia, basing her thoughts on rumor, says that the prince is said to be arrogant, an attitude typical of royalty. She admits that the prince's looks aren't her type, though she speculates that he might have some hidden charm beyond his outward appearance. Their conversation continues until they reach her dormitory, where they part ways with a quick farewell. Later that evening, as Elysia prepares for the next day, she reflects on how uncomfortable it feels to walk with Rakan after their swordsmanship classes. His presence draws attention wherever they go, making her the subject of curious and envious stares. The following morning, after her class ends, Elysia is surprised to find Rakan waiting for her outside the classroom. She wonders how long he's been standing there. It seems he's been waiting for quite some time, even though no one asked him to. Since her afternoon class is canceled, Elysia informs Rakan that she's heading back to her dormitory. As they walk together, Rakan inquires about her progress in swordsmanship. Elysia thanks him for his guidance, expressing that his advice has been genuinely helpful. She even jokes about using her newfound skills in the event of a war, referencing the tense history between the Kingdom of Ortiga and the Empire of Kashtura. Elysia finds it odd for a noble from the Empire like Rakan to approach her so openly. Out of nowhere, Elysia decides to confront Rakan directly. She asks him why he has been so interested in her lately, addressing his sudden attention head-on. Her blunt question catches Rakan off guard, but after a moment he gazes at her with bright, earnest eyes. Without hesitation, he tells her that he's interested in her. Elysia responds to Rakan's sudden confession with a mix of humor and discomfort, telling him not to say such scary things like claiming to have an interest in her. Rakan, undeterred, calmly replies that it's not something scary, it's a blessing instead. By this point, Elysia has started to grow accustomed to Rakan's bold and unconventional statements. They no longer surprise her as much as they once did. Rakan, continuing the conversation, says that if the opportunity arises, he would introduce her to his younger sibling. That way, he adds with a smirk, his claim of being interested in her wouldn't seem like a lie. Elysia suddenly recalls him mentioning a sibling who apparently bears some resemblance to her. She can't help but think that this might be some elaborate setup for arranging a marriage. Seeing her reaction, Rakan quickly defends himself, clarifying that she mustn't misunderstand his intentions. He explains that his goal is purely political. Since they've made contact, building a friendly relationship between their families would be mutually beneficial. A win-win situation for them both. Elysia glances at him, unsure of what to make of his words, but ultimately concludes that Rakan doesn't seem twisted or malicious. Getting closer to him might not be such a bad thing after all. Rakan, ever curious, shifts the topic and asks Elysia who her partner for the upcoming Academy anniversary party will be. Elysia casually tells him that she has already decided. Her partner will be Sophie. Turning the question back to him, she remarks that with his popularity, finding a partner should be no issue for him. To her shock, Rakan reveals that his partner is none other than Frederick Watts. Despite her confusion, their conversation soon ends and they exchange goodbyes. The much-anticipated Academy anniversary party finally arrives. Both Sophie and Elysia prepare themselves, dressing up for the grand event. However, as Elysia is about to leave, Sophie stops her in her tracks. Stunned, Sophie exclaims that Elysia looks far too simple and plain for such an important occasion. Not one to let her friend go unnoticed, Sophie takes it upon herself to help Elysia improve her appearance. Thanks to Sophie's efforts, Elysia's transformation is nothing short of stunning. As she enters the party, the room falls into murmurs and whispers. All eyes are drawn to her, amazed by how gorgeous she looks. Elysia, who rarely concerns herself with appearances, silently credits Sophie for her newfound elegance. Sophie, beaming with pride, keeps praising her, though her attention is soon diverted to a nearby vase. It bears Elysia's name, marking her as a nominee in the selection process. Elysia stares at the vase in disbelief, wondering who could have nominated her for the representative selection. It doesn't take long for her to deduce that it must have been Beth's doing. Suspicious, she concludes that Beth has set this up as some sort of trap. Still, Elysia remains unbothered by the possibility of winning or losing. She muses that if only she were a man, she could challenge Beth to a duel instead of dealing with such political games. As the party begins, the music swells, filling the grand hall. Elysia helps herself to a slice of cake, immediately taken aback by how delicious it is. Sophie, noticing her delight, calls out to her teasingly. Without thinking, Elysia grabs a piece of cake and stuffs it into Sophie's mouth, causing her friend to laugh as she too marvels at its taste. Their lighthearted moment is interrupted by Beth's sudden arrival. The princess approaches her with her usual smug demeanor and pointedly asks why Rakan isn't with Elysia. Sensing an opportunity, Elysia tries to turn the tables by using Rakan's name to her advantage. However, Beth fires back with sharp insults, mocking Elysia for her lack of progress with Rakan despite spending so much time together. She suggests that either Elysia lacks charm or Rakan simply has no interest in her. To deliver the final blow, Beth cruelly insinuates that it's likely both, laughing as she does. Despite the provocation, Elysia remains calm. She picks up a glass of water and responds with cunning wit, saying she didn't come to the party just for fun. She adds that a beauty like herself doesn't need to wait for others to choose her, referring to the selection of the lily and the rose. Beth's composure cracks, her fan trembling in her hand as anger overtakes her. She shouts furiously, drawing even more attention to their heated exchange. The room grows tense, the air thick with the weight of their taunts. Just as the situation threatens to spiral out of control, a man steps forward, interrupting the scene. Sophie, usually calm and reserved, steps forward to stop Beth from continuing her tirade. Elysia is shocked, barely able to process how Sophie, despite her gentle demeanor, stands firmly by her side. Beth, however, seizes the opportunity to turn her sharp words towards Sophie. With a smirk, she remarks that the company she keeps defines her, clearly referring to Sophie's status as a commoner. The insult is biting, but Beth doesn't stop there. She goes further, calling Sophie a riffraff and daring to ask what she is selling at the party. Ceramics, dresses, or in a final cruel blow, even her body. The crowd erupts in laughter at Beth's vicious mockery. Beth is so harsh! Elysia's temper finally boils over. She shouts Beth's name, her voice cutting through the laughter, demanding that she stop immediately. Before she can fully confront her, however, a sudden tap on her back makes her turn. Without thinking, fueled by anger, she grabs the person behind her and slams him to the ground in one swift motion. The crowd gasps, their attention now entirely on Elysia. Still pinning the man to the ground, Elysia glares at Beth and demands to know if she was the one who put her name on the vase. Beth stands frozen in silence, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Elysia takes a deep breath, her voice calm but firm as she delivers her final warning. She stayed quiet for a while, not because she was afraid of you, but because she didn't want to stoop to her level. Beth doesn't want to mess with the people around her out of petty spite. It was her last chance. The atmosphere of the party shifts dramatically. The once lively music fades into the background as all eyes focus on the aftermath of the confrontation. Beth, usually the one in control, stands humiliated. Her insults have backfired, and in the eyes of the crowd, she's become the villain of the night, self-destructing in front of everyone. Just as the tension reaches its peak, a familiar voice cuts through the murmurs. Rakan strides into the scene, holding another man in his grip, the one Elysia had just subdued. His expression is calm but commanding as he approaches her. He gently instructs her to let go of the man and take his hand instead. Elysia hesitates but ultimately releases the man and takes Rakan's offered hand. Rakan turns to Elysia, his tone light but curious about the vase with her name on it. He wonders if Elysia put it herself. Elysia is taken aback by his question, but before she can respond, Beth interrupts, hurling yet another round of insults towards her. This time, Rakan doesn't stay silent. He glares at Beth, his eyes burning with a quiet fury that makes her visibly shrink. To everyone's surprise, Beth backs off without another word and hastily leaves the scene. Elysia watches in astonishment, wondering why Beth, who moments ago was so bold and cruel, now seems so meek in Rakan's presence. She can't help but suspect that there's more to the dynamic between Beth and Rakan than meets the eye. Once Beth is gone, Rakan returns to his earlier question, asking Elysia again if she had nominated herself for the selection. Elysia glances away, choosing not to reveal the truth since it doesn't matter anymore. Even if she told everyone that Beth did it, nothing would change. Her thoughts shift to a more pressing concern. Won't he get in trouble with the Emperor for siding with her like this? Turning her voice tinged with worry. Rakan doesn't answer directly, brushing off the question as if it's of no consequence. Instead, he changes the subject, mentioning Sophie's pale complexion during the confrontation. He had asked Frederick, Sophie's fiancé, to escort her somewhere safe. Elysia is touched by the memory of Sophie standing up for her despite her frail condition. She realizes how deeply her friend cares for her, and a warm sense of gratitude fills her heart. As the tension at the party gradually fades, Rakan takes the lead, introducing Elysia to two of his classmates and friends, Frederick and Nigel. Frederick, ever the gentleman, greets her warmly. Elysia finds herself immediately impressed by his polite demeanor and gentle presence, which stand in stark contrast to Rakan's bold and unpredictable nature. Nigel, however, gives off an entirely different vibe. Nigel awkwardly asks if the introductions are finished, prompting Frederick to remind him that he still needs to introduce himself. Elysia is taken aback by how informally Nigel speaks to her, finding his demeanor off-putting. She silently wonders how Rakan ended up with such contrasting friends. Sophie rejoins the group after resting in the lounge. Frederick, visibly concerned, asks her if she's feeling better. Sophie, maintaining her composure, assures him she's fine. Frederick explains that he did not accompany her as her partner at her request to keep their relationship private, but pleads with her to spend time with him during the party instead. Elysia observes the interaction between Sophie and Frederick, but notices something strange. Sophie's gaze towards Nigel and his toward her seem to carry an unspoken meaning. Piecing things together, Elysia concludes that Nigel might be the reason Sophie turned Frederick down as her partner. This realization also deepens her suspicion that Nigel not only dislikes her, as a princess from a hostile country, but also looks down on commoners like Sophie. Deciding to take action, Elysia hatches a plan to put Nigel at a disadvantage. She asks everyone to excuse herself for a moment and requests Rakan to be her partner for a brief conversation. This clever move indirectly forces Frederick and Sophie to spend time together as they step away from the group. Elysia watches them leave, satisfied that her plan has worked, while Nigel visibly grows angrier before storming off. With Nigel gone, Elysia feels more at ease. Rakan, now alone with Elysia, asks what she wanted to discuss with him. Elysia admits that she didn't actually have anything important to say and used the excuse to give Sophie and Frederick some time together. Rakan seems unimpressed and remarks that he feels like she just used him as a convenient excuse. He adds that he thought her concern might have been about the upcoming selection. Elysia laughs off his comment, jokingly asking if he would give her a loyalty vote if she really did have a question. Rakan replies nonchalant, leaving Elysia shocked by his ambiguity. The headmaster enters the party, signaling the start of the Rose and Lily selection. He taps his glass to grab everyone's attention and officially announces the commencement of the voting. As the first votes are cast, Beth confidently approaches the vase, clearly expecting to win. Initially, Elysia thinks she doesn't care about the results. However, the weight of being dragged into the mess Beth created and the looming possibility of public humiliation begin to weigh on her. Let's go, Elysia! She calculates that if she combines her votes with those of her senior, Sophie, she might gather 6 or 7 votes at most. Before she can dwell further on her thoughts, Rakan surprises her. He speaks up, acknowledging that he might not have been the best senior to her so far, but he plans to make up for it by casting his vote for her. Elysia watches, stunned, as Rakan confidently walks to the vase and places a lily in Frederick's vase and a rose in hers. The room erupts in whispers and chatter as everyone notices his unexpected action. Elysia is left dumbfounded, unsure of how to interpret his gesture. She wonders if Rakan's vote is a sign of their growing closeness, or if there's another reason behind it. Her thoughts are interrupted when Frederick approaches and pulls Rakan aside for a private conversation. Outside the party, Frederick confronts Rakan directly, asking if he is genuinely interested in the princess of a hostile country. His concern is evident, and he questions the implications of Rakan's actions. Rakan quickly dismisses the assumption, explaining that his gesture was not romantic. He tells Frederick that his intention is to introduce Elysia to Han, fostering a connection that could build a peaceful relationship between their countries. Rakan emphasizes that the current truce between their nations, which has lasted 20 years, is meaningless, and it's time to move beyond it. Frederick, still uneasy, argues that Rakan didn't need to give Elysia his rose to achieve such a goal. Rakan disagrees, stating that she is well suited for the role and deserving of recognition. Frederick remains concerned that others might misinterpret Rakan's actions and that this could lead to political complications. Rakan brushes off these concerns, reminding Frederick that they are all just students at the academy. He assures him that his position won't be affected by such trivial matters. The cold breeze blows overhead as Frederick continues to be upfront with Rakan about his concerns. As heir to the Empire, he should be wary of how people perceive his interactions with Elysia, the princess of an enemy country. Rakan doesn't indulge Frederick. He walks past him, giving him the cold shoulder and ending their conversation without so much as a proper response. He knows his friend means well, but Frederick should know better than to doubt him, let alone his judgment. Back inside, Elysia can't help but wonder about the extent of Rakan's influence in Swaina Academy. Her thoughts are cut short when a fellow student asks her for a dance, but before she could even take his hand, he retreats away immediately. Confused, Elysia turns the other direction, only to bump into her direct senior, Rakan. Little does she know he's the reason why the other guy backed off. Seeing how her partner already took off running, a light bulb goes off in her head. She might as well just ask Rakan to dance with her tonight. How bad could it be? She musters a smile and holds out her hand towards him, inviting him to dance. A few seconds go by and he still does nothing. She huffs and turns to leave, thinking he's not interested. Like clockwork, he immediately grabs her, wrapping his arm around her waist and holding her hand in his own. He pulls her closer, holding her dearly as he guides her towards the dance floor. His proximity flusters Elysia. Suddenly, she feels stiff, unable to dance. Her heart is thumping so loudly in her chest and her face flushes a deep red. "Girl, I feel you. He's too fine." Rakan catches on to her nervousness. He doesn't pass up the opportunity to tease her. After all, she was the one to ask him for a dance, but now it seems that she wants to quit so quickly. Breaking the ice between them, he curiously asks her how many people she's danced with tonight. 3, she says. He closes his eyes at her response. How amusing. Other guys totally had the guts to beat him to her. Is that a tinge of jealousy, Rakan? Without missing a beat, Elysia returns his question. When he tells her she's the only one to ask him for a dance, a genuine smile makes its way to her face. For some reason unknown to her, that piece of information pleases her. The music dies down and the principal comes forth bearing announcements. The voting for both Lily and Rose has finally concluded and it's time to announce the winners. The representative for Lily is none other than Frederick Watts. The crowd erupts into cheer and applause but quickly silences in anticipation for the Rose. Who could this year's Rose be? It's surely the talk of the night, with Elizabeth and Elysia competing for the title. Elysia Ortega! The principal's voice booms across the room, and cheers immediately follow after. Elysia breaks away from Rakan for a moment, making her way towards the front and taking her place beside the representative for Lily, Frederick. Taking a deep breath, she collects her thoughts before beginning her speech. She truly didn't expect to win, but nevertheless, she feels honored to be given the title. A sense of gratitude fills her heart. Without a doubt, she'll work hard to make everyone's vote worthwhile. Meanwhile, a bitter Elizabeth sneers and exits the venue, obviously vexed by everyone's comments. Well, if the shoe fits, Beth. Both Elysia and Frederick take their first walk as representatives. As they are showered with flowers, confetti, and applause, Elysia thinks that maybe this isn't so bad. In the quiet of the night, Rakan finds where Elysia has taken refuge from the ballroom's festivities. It's not like she was hard to find. After all, how could he miss someone so dazzling? His compliment catches her off guard, wondering how he can say such things so casually. Apparently, Elysia is unaccustomed to all of this. Being the star of the night feels quite off, especially when the people who cheered for her were the same people who were just talking about her moments before her triumph. Hearing her, Rakan takes out a cloth and drapes it over her shoulders, shielding her from the cold. Alas, that's the nature of power, he recounts. It surrounds you with many people, yet it makes you feel lonely all the same. At that moment, she can't help but notice that he too looks lonely. Right? You can almost feel his loneliness. Out of the blue, she croaks out a heartfelt thank you to Rakan. After all, his vote did her a huge favor and saved her from humiliation. But little does she know that he never did it out of pity for her. He truly believed her to be worthy of the position. As they stay under the moonlight, Elysia wonders just how impressive Rakan's family is. The way he acts and talks, it's almost as if he's the prince of the empire. He beams at her musings. He is, in fact, the first prince of the empire, the one with direct claim to the throne. Everyone at school knows that. But suddenly it hits him. Does she not know who he is? Curiously, he asks her if she's ever met the prince in person. She admits she hasn't, and that it would be better for things to stay that way. They're royals from opposing countries anyway. She proudly tells him that she's only seen him in portraits painted by court artists. Rakan snorts in response. She really doesn't know who he is. How bad could his portrait be to the point that she couldn't even recognize him in real life? He sounds almost offended and amused at the same time. But for someone not to know him and his position, the princess of an enemy nation at that, is truly amusing to him. In the end, he doesn't give his identity away. Instead, he dares to observe how things go. As Elysia returns to her quarters, she is immediately greeted by Sophie. Without delay, she thanks Elysia. It's only because of her that she was able to enjoy the night with Frederick. Elysia smiles as she recalls her own experience. Dancing and being so close to Rakan, she admits her own enjoyment of the night. The following morning, sitting atop a stone wall fence, Elysia hangs out at the school grounds with a friend. All of a sudden, someone calls out her name. She knows that voice all too well. Rakan. As he comes into view, she can't help but feel flustered. She quickly composes herself, forcing herself to act as calm as possible. Seeing Rakan, Elysia's friend immediately makes herself scarce, giving the two some privacy. He informs Elysia that the principal wants to see them both, and it's best to go together to find out what it's all about. Without a second thought, he extends a hand, hoping to assist her as she jumps down. She stares at his hands in amusement. He really is a gentleman, isn't he? Rakan, in turn, watches her in awe as she gracefully leaps down without taking his hand. The way the wind blew her hair and how she didn't need assistance, he could only consider himself captured by the sights. That's it! I'm just sure he's starting to admire her. Walking together, Rakan stops midway, a soft gaze as he glances down at Elysia to ask something. Would she be free this coming weekend? It takes Elysia a while to register what Rakan had just asked her. Did he really just ask her if she was free this weekend? Why is he asking such a thing? Flustered and confused, she asks him if he's talking to her. He flashes her a deadpan look. Duh, obviously. You think he'd be talking to the sky? She beams at him, curious as to why he would ask her out on a date. Hearing this, Rakan ponders on her choice of words. A date. Without missing a beat, he teases her, asking if that's how she really wanted it to be. All jokes aside, Rakan reminds her of an upcoming class assignment. They are tasked to write a review on a performance, so naturally he'd like for them to go together. Realization hits Elysia. He had wanted to accomplish the assignment together. She scoffs at herself, visibly embarrassed for thinking it was going to be a date. Looking back at him, her humiliation once again surfaces. It's really no help when he looks like such a tease. In the principal's office, the two take seats across from each other. The principal wastes no time in getting down to business. He is most pleased with how Rakan and Elysia are getting along. In fact, he takes great pride in handpicking them to be direct seniors and juniors. Elysia nods and agrees reluctantly, not entirely sure of where the principal is heading with this talk. Of course she's confused. She doesn't even know that Rakan is the prince of the empire. The principal continues to ramble on. Diplomacy, communication, relationship about countries, the whole enchilada. He even shows them his office furniture, all sourced from the empire and its allies, showcasing a harmony of nations. Exasperated, Rakan realizes that this had all been a setup from the start. The principal is definitely trying to play the middleman in bridging peace for both the Empire and Ortega. As the two return to their dormitories, Elysia begins to bring up the topic of the upcoming performance. Even though Rakan was the one to offer the idea of them going together, she wants to be the one to plan it. What they're watching, the schedule, and everything else. He has done so much to help her already, so Elysia feels that this would be a great way to repay him. After all, she doesn't want to feel indebted to him for everything he's done. Upon her insistence, she convinces him to give in. But before parting ways, she tells him that she'll pick him up, and that he should just focus on looking nice. What does look nice even mean? Rakan seems to be racking his brain trying to figure out what to wear. One clothing piece after another is thrown from his closet to the floor. Even his roommate starts showing concerns for the mess. They're all laundry, he says. I love how he doesn't even admit he's in a fashion crisis. Afraid to pry more, his roommate settles on just leaving him be. Suddenly, Rakan approaches him, shoving 2 tickets into his hand. Tickets to Mier's opera. Confused, he asks Rakan if he wants to watch it together. He immediately regrets it because now a death glare was aimed right at him. Rakan claims to have no use for the tickets anymore. Not wanting to add fuel to the flame, he merely thanks him for the gesture. However, he can't help but stare in awe at the tickets. These are rare and expensive, no doubt. Finally, the night of Rakan and Elysia's meeting has come. Arriving early and dressed in a long purple and patterned gown, she waits for Rakan to arrive at their meeting place. Moments later, he emerges from the shadows and Elysia becomes wide-eyed at the sight before her. He looks absolutely dashing. Rakan is so fine that our girl was left speechless. He's wearing a beautiful combination of bright and dark pieces, with even a vest and a cape to go along with it. She compliments him with the only word that she can truly describe him with: beautiful. Rakan pauses. He isn't used to be complimented with beautiful. Changing the subject, he asks where the carriage is. This makes Elysia's expression soften. Enthusiastically, she tells him that their destination cannot be reached by a carriage. As the moonlight shines brightly, she leads the way, exclaiming not to get lost in excitement. Rakan wonders where Elysia is taking him. He sure hopes that she isn't planning on going anywhere dangerous. Elysia smirks. So what if she is? Either way, she has faith in Rakan. The strongest person she knows could surely protect her. When he replies, smirking and telling her to trust him, she realizes she lost in her own game. Soon enough, a circus tent comes into view. Rakan says nothing, only taking it all in. Seeing him like that, she wonders if he dislikes the place she's chosen. As if sensing her worry, Rakan smiles and invites her inside. With renewed anticipation, she hastily points at the snack bars, hinting for them to grab some popcorn before heading in. It turns out an upperclassman had brought Elysia here before. It was so interesting that it caught her attention. Although she enjoys big theater performances, nothing beats a raw and refreshing experience like the one at the circus. The show begins, and immediately the circus roars to life. Rings of fire, leaping jaguars, tightrope cyclers, and flying daggers move in unison into a grand performance. Elysia notices Rakan's expression, a combination of awe, shock, and amazement. More people arrive, so she tells him to scoot closer. But as soon as he does so, his hand accidentally rests on top of hers, causing Elysia to blush profusely. The first act concludes, and Rakan calls Elysia's attention. As she turns to look at him, she is met with his hand extending towards her, a popcorn in his clutches. Is he trying to feed her popcorn? Flustered, she reaches out for the bag, grabbing popcorn on her own. Oh, come on, just let it happen. It was supposed to be romantic. Munching on their snacks, she stops midway, realizing that he'd been leaning the popcorn bag towards her the whole time. Maybe that's his way of looking out for a junior. When the snacks run out, Rakan internally smirks, a look of pride on his face. He's pleased to see that she's eating well. Meanwhile, Elysia sits in embarrassment, realizing that she ate too frantically. When he offers to buy more, she is quick to turn him down. Normally, she'd be touched, but the way he makes himself sound like such a tease, she knows not to let him get the last laugh. Elysia erupts in a fit of laughter, while Rakan seems to have a blank expression as they watch a parody of Romeo and Juliet. He really isn't used to performances like this. In his head, they may be crude, but they aren't that bad. As soon as the show ends, the two exchange comments and reviews. Where Elysia's is more on experience, Rakan's is more detailed and analyzed, earning him a teasing for being on assignment mode right away. But then again, that's why they're there, right? All for their assignment. Nothing more. Ouch, I can feel the pain all the way here. Not wanting to dampen her mood, she perks up, smiling at Rakan, asking him how he felt about the night. He smiles at her, admitting that it was a refreshing experience. Before they leave, she makes a point to thank him. He held the popcorn bag for her the entire time. She should at least be grateful. Haughty as ever, Rakan manages to tease her again, claiming it was nothing since she basically inhaled all the food. A vein could pop at any moment with how Elysia's annoyance for Rakan was beginning to show. But before she could counter him, he immediately takes it back. As long as she was eating comfortably with no worry, then that was enough for him. Hearing him say things like that, she can't help but find him endearing. Suddenly, she finds herself thinking more of Rakan than her own fiancé, Damien. As you should. Damien was a good-for-nothing cheater. The moon hangs higher in the sky as the night grows later. As they walk back, all Elysia can think about is stopping herself from falling for Rakan. Exam season is upon them. It would be a good time to dismiss her feelings, especially since they wouldn't be seeing each other often. Rakan escorts Elysia back to her dormitory, but before he leaves her, he seems to be curious about something. She mentioned an upperclassman taking her to the circus before. He can't help but wonder who exactly. It turns out it was her roommate Sophie who took her to the circus before. Hearing this, Rakan feels a sort of relief wash over him. Could it be that you thought a guy took her there, Rakan? Just when Elysia thinks they're done for the night, Rakan blurts out another thing that catches her attention. He's asking to have dinner with her sometime soon. Well, so much for trying to move on. In a matter-of-fact way, she retorts that she has exams coming up. However, he doesn't seem to be taking the hint. She begins to reason with him, but she loses her footing and falls right into his arms. Flustered and embarrassed, she croaks out a quiet thank you to him. Seeing her like this, Rakan can't help but smile. It's true, though, that Elysia won't have much time to hang out in the next few days. After all, she'd be busy studying and fulfilling the role of the Rose representative. However, this gives Rakan more determination, something that Elysia was not expecting at all. Some would think that he'd take the hint and leave her be, but no. Stubborn as ever, he decides to propose that they study together. Resigning herself, Elysia sighs and agrees. Anyway, they have overlapping classes, so maybe they can help each other somehow. Sure, let's keep trying to justify spending time with him. Interestingly, Elysia is the type of person who prefers to have better grades than others. Hearing this, his expression softens. Being competitive is such an Elysia trait. Finally, the two exchange their farewells for the night, but not before planning to meet at the library the day after. Heading inside the dormitory, Elysia exhales deeply, her cheeks flushing red. How did she manage to agree to all of that? So much for her resolve to stop her feelings. The following day, the two meet as planned. In the library, they sit across from each other, their books and notes laid out on the table. But despite trying her best to study, it proves to be too difficult when Rakan looks so majestic as the sunlight hits his face. Suddenly, she averts her gaze when Rakan catches her staring in his direction. Trying to find a way out of it, she tells him she noticed a handsome guy pass by. As if someone could be more handsome than the guy in front of you. Ever so quickly, Elysia manages to change the subject. She recalls the first time she met him, and she chides him for acting like a crazy narcissist. She sincerely worries for him if he keeps acting like that when meeting new people. Had they not become close, she'd still have that impression of him. Rakan takes in all her rambling, but he makes no move to protest. Instead, he smiles calmly in response. He's trying to act so nonchalant. Once more, Elysia can feel the butterflies in her stomach. He seriously needs to stop doing that because he looks more beautiful every time he does it. As the examination week comes to an end, Elysia celebrates her freedom in the best possible way. Sleeping. Elysia slept her way throughout 3 days and nights. So much so that even Sophie worried for her. Just when she catches up on her much-needed rest, she feels all giddy as it falls on the same day as their grade announcements. Competitive as she is, she automatically set her expectations to become rank 1. But to her horror, her name is listed in 2nd place. In disbelief, she checks to see who ranked first, only to find her heart breaking at the name Melissa. Melissa, a fellow princess like herself. She's the woman her fiancé held so passionately in the garden, the woman he had cheated on her with. She never expected to cross paths with her at Swaina Academy.